And we welcome you to another edition of This Is Wrestling, WWE Unreal, Episode 3, and a focus on the women of the WWE. Lee Versage and Zach McGibbon with you. Always great to be able to talk to you again, Zach. And this Episode 3, for me, was a little bit of a departure from the first couple of episodes. I thought a little bit more character development, and for the probably the strongest time since I've been watching so far, I felt like I was getting some real behind the scenes stuff with the women of the WWE.
Yeah, it was interesting how they were kind of laying this out. As you mentioned, we got some good looks on a lot of the talent on the roster. Chelsea Green was prominently featured. There was also a focus on Charlotte as well. So it was interesting. As you mentioned, it was kind of more of a focus on the women of the WWE and going into the Women's Royal Rumble, how they were going to put everything over and get set for plans later on. So it was an interesting angle that they decided to go with for episode 3.
So let's talk about, it was almost divided into thirds with Chelsea Green, as you mentioned, and then Charlotte Flair, and then Bianca Belair. Let's talk a little bit about the first third, if I'm able to put it that way, and what Chelsea Green goes through here in being a focal point, and with a pay-per-view that is very close to her home, and feeling some of the, I got tickets for all my bridesmaids and all my friends, and I got so much family going to come, but I'm not booked yet on the show. And she never got booked on the show. I think that this is a real positive in the way that people look at Chelsea Green. I think if you didn't know who Chelsea Green was and you watched the first 15, 20 minutes of this episode, you had some sympathy for Chelsea Green, and you could kind of feel what she was going through, wanting to be on one of the biggest shows and the disappointment of not being on that show. I thought this was a good way, if that was their goal, to make it look like somebody, these are the things that they actually go through, and it's not always being on the top of the card. I kind of like the way they did this, and it seemed real to me. And I also had some sympathy for Chelsea Green through this.
Yeah, she kind of had her own Dennis Stamp moment where she's just waiting to get booked. I'm not booked, Terry. I'm not booked. And that's kind of what happened with Chelsea Green, where she was just waiting to get booked onto the show in Vancouver, and it ended up not turning out that way, getting all those tickets and trying to get all of her friends kind of set up for her in-ring debut on pay-per-view and whatnot. So yeah, it's one of those deals that kind of going back to the overall theme of, building the characters of the WWE and kind of learning more. And this was stuff that I was hoping that they would show a little bit more, in the sense of, when I was going into this show, I was worried it was just going to be all these positive spins and everybody loves each other and everything's great. And stuff like this, where you kind of show some of the downsides, the negative aspects, some of the things like real life things that are happening to these wrestlers and how they're reacting to it, and how things could change where, at one point, in this case, she was never booked, but you also kind of get the sense of, like, sometimes you'll be booked for something, sometimes you won't be. And so when you get that sort of peak, especially for somebody like Chelsea Green, who's just kind of, as they explain for her character, she's kind of just somebody that is on the roster. She's not like a total feature player like a Charlotte, but somebody who is somebody you find on the mid card and continue to try and find a role on TV. It kind of gives a little bit more of that sort of depth for Chelsea Green when you watch her here.
To me, this is how you make new stars. If you're attracting people that don't watch your program, to say like Drive to Survive and all the different behind the scenes shows in sports, this is what people go through. I think Chelsea Green came out looking fantastic, even though I'm sure it was difficult for her to go through some of these things. And I think there's a formula there, right? To how to take somebody that's on the undercard. Well, let me ask you, do you think they did this on purpose to say, hey, after we air this footage, we're hoping to make Chelsea Green a bigger star?
That's an interesting question. I'm going to say no, only because the way that she's kind of been booked on TV, I know it's kind of deviating away from the show itself, but the way she's kind of booked on TV, it's hard to kind of really find that alleyway for her to be a featured player, a main event player. Certainly, I think it would be something where it's a familiar name so that when you are watching on TV and she is somebody that is, focused on the television, that can get a little bit more of those people that are tuning in from that Netflix show onto WWE to say, hey, I saw her on Unreal. I see her now on TV here. So I think it's more of a recognition factor as opposed to let's push her so that she could be our next big star in WWE.
I'm also going to ask you about, I thought it was really interesting that they didn't want her to use her feature move to win the title. How did you feel about that?
It kind of goes back to what we talked about with road agents on the show. It's like, what are kind of the roles here? What do they sort of give? And that one was also something I was kind of trying to figure out why she wasn't allowed to use her finisher. I still am kind of confused about that, if I'm being honest. Because I believe it was Shane Helms, right, that was producing the match. And yeah, I would have liked a little bit more of an explanation as to why Shane Helms was like, oh, let's try and do this move you've never done before, and as the way to finish off the match, as opposed to, as she mentions, why don't I just use the unprettier or whatever as my finisher? So would have liked a little bit more of an explanation to that, why at this stage, unless it was something where he was trying to establish a new finishing move for her and something that could be impactful, but it sounded like even then she was like, no, I'm not doing something new, especially something that's more risky for her skill set. So yeah, it was kind of weird that they would even kind of consider looking into a different finisher for her.
Yeah, I think the standing up for yourself and not budging off of a big moment is really good to build up the person. I'm not sure how it makes the company look.
Yep.
Because they do have all of these people putting all this time and effort and into what's going on, and somebody's just going to say no. But you watched Chelsea Green and you understood why she said no. Like, you still, this wasn't like a person with some backlash because they don't like what someone's saying. It was, no, this is the right thing to do. And the wrestling mind in me is like, do they want her to do a leg drop because her husband has a finisher in the indies with a leg drop or a leg maneuver?
Yes.
I don't know. Like, do those things tie in together and they're trying to establish something new to put her on top? We just didn't get enough information.
Yeah.
I guess from it. But I also either applaud them for putting that in, making the road agents and the WWE telling her to do something, and she kind of did something else and stood up for herself and won. I don't know how that makes the company look. Did they do that on purpose to say that wrestlers have more say and they're trying to get that point across? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I knew I felt good for her in the end, winning the US title and doing it with the same move. And I thought she did it really well,
Yeah.
A little bit more, a little bit extra on the move, and good for her.
I will say too, sometimes when you see those interactions, I think it's good to kind of see an interaction like that, because a lot of the time when you hear about something where, oh, this wrestler pushed back on this sort of creative idea, I think the immediate reaction for a lot of fans that might not be too familiar is like, oh, they're trying to stroke creative control. They're trying to, be the modern day Hulk Hogan. They're trying to, change the creative for the better. But when you actually look at it, it's like, hey, like this isn't a great idea. Why don't we do this? It's more about creative collaboration as opposed to control. You know what I mean? And so when you kind of see it as a fan, it's like, okay, that makes a lot more sense, because I think this happens way more than what people think. And when stuff kind of gets leaked out about, oh, this person had sort of a difference of ideas when it came to creative, that doesn't necessarily mean it's like they said, oh, that's not going to work for me, brother. I'm not putting my shoulders down on the mat. It's more of the idea of, oh, I don't think this idea will get over as much as you think it would. Why don't we try this avenue? So I think something like that, a scene like that, is good to have, because you see that sort of collaboration. And let's just not talk about the actual match itself, because it wasn't very good. But in terms of the behind the scenes, it was a good insight into everything that went into that match.
Off to Birmingham, Alabama, and Charlotte Flair. You and I have talked a lot on previous programs about what can you do to make Charlotte Flair a little bit more human and not this person who she's trying to be, and just let her be a little bit more herself and let people in and be a little bit more vulnerable. Well, the show had it. Talking about her knee and a full surgery and rehab and crying, and then all the stuff about her brother Reed and passing away, what she had to do to deal with it at the time, how much it affects her now. I don't remember watching something going, that's not even Charlotte Flair, that's just Ashley Fleer, or whatever you pronounce her last name, Fleer. That's just the person. And to be honest, that's the goal of this show. That I'm going to remember Chelsea Green because she's Canadian and of the heartbreak of not having the family there. But I'm really going to remember the Charlotte Flair stuff here and everything that they did to show you that she is a human being with lots of feelings. I applaud Charlotte for letting that footage get out, and I applaud the WWE for putting it out, because I don't know how you watch that and not be more of a Charlotte Flair fan.
Yeah, and I think the timing too, when this episode was released, the Netflix series was released, you also had that Players Tribune article that Charlotte had put out as well. So I think you have that timing coming together, and you get a better look at who Ashley Fleer, the wrestler behind Charlotte, is as a human being, and you understand that her trying to come back from an injury that's brought her out for a year, and then obviously they talked about, as you mentioned, with her brother Reed Flair many years ago, the death of Reed. And so this was this did a good job of really kind of having you learn more about the human being of Ashley Fleer, because I think for the longest time, like you mentioned, all these years, you just kind of have this visual of Charlotte's just on top and dominant, and just continues to be the woman that continues to be focused on and pushed by WWE. And sometimes with that, you kind of separate with the character and the person. And in this case, they did a good job of really kind of identifying and showing, hey, this is a human being. This is what are the struggles that she's battling through and what she's hoping to overcome when she returns at the Rumble.
So this is what solidified the show for me, feeling just, I know the show is called Unreal, and it's supposed to give you more real footage behind the scenes. It felt like it was what the WWE wanted us to see in the first two.
Yep.
This is the first time I felt like this is what it should be. And maybe that's because you had a lot of sympathy for Chelsea Green, like just with her family and all those things. And then you had a ton of sympathy for Charlotte Flair. And I don't know that you can equate reality to just having sympathy for somebody, but to me, it came across like this feels like what it should be.
Yeah, it feels more organic.
Yeah. And that was stamped home and put into place. And I felt like this is the show that I'm getting the most real footage behind the scenes. When I saw the discussion of maybe Charlotte and Bianca can eliminate each other.
Yes.
at 28 and 29 in the Women's Royal Rumble, and entrant 30 will just walk in and win. And maybe that should be Chelsea Green. Boy, did I have a laugh. I'm like, Zach is going to have a field day with this one.
Could you imagine if that actually happened in the Rumble?
Yes. Yes.
They go through. Imagine my reaction coming onto the podcast afterwards.
No, but I can imagine the WWE doing it.
Yeah.
I know you're going to hate me for saying this, but I actually don't mind the idea.
Oh, man.
I think if you had the right person, and I really like Chelsea Green a lot, but she's not the right person.
Yeah.
To go on to a title match at WrestleMania. The idea, though, that somebody big, somebody you don't expect to be there, you have a massive comeback. And I don't want to equate it too much, but to me, it would be like Brock Lesnar coming out at SummerSlam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's always rumors, but you didn't expect Brock Lesnar to be back at the end of SummerSlam. What if you did this at 28 and 29, go out and you dim the lights and you wait even longer, and number 30 is just winning, and it's somebody big? I don't hate the idea. In this particular instance, I wouldn't be a big fan of Chelsea Green being the person to get the WrestleMania title match, because I know I'm not going to get a great match.
Yep.
But I don't hate the idea, Zach.
It would have to be. I do hate the idea, but
I know.
It would have to be, if you're going to execute it, like you mentioned, it would have to be understandable to who that wrestler is, and it would have to at least be satisfactory. I think that would be very, very, very tough to find that. And
okay, but let me throw this at you then.
Sure.
How much satisfaction did you get from Charlotte Flair winning the Royal Rumble this year?
It was a very neutral reaction.
Right. So why would it have to be as big as you're saying, when all you did was have the top women's star in the WWE win the Royal Rumble and you had a very neutral reaction? Why would it have to be so big?
Well, I would much rather take a neutral reaction than a negative reaction where I'm just yelling and screaming at the end. But yeah, I mean,
okay, but let me put something in perspective, and not that people wouldn't speculate all the time, but say it was Mercedes Moné coming back to the WWE. Would you be okay with that?
I'd be okay with the winner. I don't know if I would love it from the standpoint of this is how you're going to establish her right away.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know.
Her walking in and getting this title shot because Charlotte Flair and Bianca Belair eliminated themselves, and now you have the jealous Charlotte and Bianca on somebody who doesn't deserve it, and somebody that can rub it in that they don't deserve it. Like,
well, if I switched it around, let's say Will Ospreay showed up in WWE, and let's say it was Drew McIntyre and Seth Rollins that eliminated each other at 28, 29, and Will Ospreay walks out. Would you have that sort of same reaction?
If so, not Will Ospreay in his current form, because he's not a heel.
Correct. But you get the idea, right?
Yeah, but so let's just do it. If they did it last year and it was Brock Lesnar, well, I don't know that I'd have an issue with it.
Brock would be interesting, actually. Yeah.
It's got to be somebody really big.
Yep.
That even though they didn't deserve to win the Rumble, you know that they deserve a spot in the main event at WrestleMania.
Yep.
So it's got to be that caliber of name. But I still don't hate the idea. I thought it was interesting that they showed that part of it.
Yeah.
And then they go on to Bianca Belair and making all of her stuff and a little bit behind the scenes with her. And then they get to the Women's Royal Rumble. What did you make of the back half of the show?
They were talking about Jade Cargill in that back half as well, and and all that. Kind of going back to episode 2 where they had the really cool cuts of people coming into the ring, and and talking about the entrances and the way the women were wrestling as well, and the way that they cut to different sequences was really cool. I thought it was interesting. They did show a little bit. I had forgotten about the wardrobe malfunction that Lyra Valkyria had. So they showed that as well, in terms of just like how the producers and the refs were kind of helping to make sure that things kept staying on track. But this second half, it was just kind of, for me, it was kind of your usual, all right, we're kind of going through with the plan. This is what we're going to do. Here's what's happening. Wasn't anything to really write home about in the second half for me personally. But there were some of the editing was pretty cool on the way that they edited the Rumble and all that. So it didn't really drive home anything for me in terms of anything new or any sort of feeling. It was just kind of like, all right, this is part of the show. You know what I mean? As one humble Hearst Helmsley would say, it's all part of the show.
So I do agree that the back half lacked a little bit for me, but I came away with the fact that Charlotte was much more human, and I thought a bigger star afterwards because she let people in, and that Chelsea Green was a bigger star afterwards. And when this show ended, even though it didn't end on this big high and like this crazy drama, I liked the way this one came across because it felt more authentic than the first two for me. And that's what I want out of the series. I want to watch the series and feel like I'm getting stuff that you can't find out before. And I'm not totally positive I felt that way.
Yeah.
In the first two, but I did feel that way here in episode 3. Well, Zach, if that's not enough, can you believe what the next episode is?
Oh, it's this is going to be an interesting discussion. Discussing the heel turn. I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on the next episode of this review of Unreal.
So that will be in episode 4, of course, focusing in on John Cena, but they focused in on the women, and I thought WWE Unreal episode 3 was a very, very good show. For Zach McGibbon, I'm Lee Versage. Thanks again for listening to This Is Wrestling.